Hello everyone, welcome back to the class. So for this week, we are going to continue our theme of love in the time of war and going to read a very different text written by a male literatus living in the 17th century China. So we are going to encounter a very different type of genre because and very different from any works we have encountered throughout the semester in this course, because previously we read a lot of different stories, but all of them are considered fictional creations. So those are fictions. Those are creatively written by an author and is created, is not real. But this text we are going to read is supposed to be a real life record. So it concerns real historical figures, real historical moments, and real historical events. So every person in this text, we can find a historical equivalent in the history. But I think after reading this specific text, you can decide it for yourself how would you define which is fictional and which is real, or how to draw the line between fiction and reality. So the text we are going to read for this week is Mao Xiang's Reminiscence of the Plum Shadow Convent, a very poetic and romantic title. And I put two pictures here. On the right is our female protagonist named Dong Xiaowan or Dong Bai, while on the right is our male protagonist Mao Xiang, and he is also the writer of this whole text. So basically, Mao Xiang, the writer, is kind of doing a memoir, writing a memoir about his deceased concubine. So was paying respect to his concubine, but in a very interesting, private, and different way. So let's first take a look at who is Mao Xiang. So Mao Xiang is a Chinese literatus living from 1611 to 1693. And he was born in Rugao. Rugao is a small city in the Jiangnan area. If you still remember when I was introducing the background for the oil peddler Queen of Flower story, I mentioned Jiangnan area, that specific southeast part of China, at that time 17th century, 18th century, is one of the most flourished and energetic kind of area in the whole China, in terms of economy, culture, or even politics. So very, very lively region. And Mao Xiang is also born within that region. And he was born in a distinguished scholar official family. And he is a very prolific writer and leaves a lot of writings. He is considered one of the four young masters at the end of the Ming Dynasty, or in Chinese, 明末四公子, so including Mao Xiang and Fang Yizhi, Chen Huizhen, Hou Fangyu. So these young masters you can consider them as playboys at that time. So they are, at one hand, very romantic and doing a lot of unrestricted things in their private life. They hang out with courtesans and write a lot of poems. And on the other hand, they are also very self-conscious about political affairs and would like to contribute themselves to the country and to the dynasty. So this kind of celebrity or playboy kind of group, Mao Xiang is one of them. So he is actually a staunch member of the Revival Society, which is a very interesting community concerning both literature and politics. So in the Revival Society, they exchange poems and essays, doing a lot of literature-related work, and also they will have comments on current political situation and will do actually a lot of movement target at the eunuch party, so the so-called Yandang, the source of the corruption of the whole society or the whole empire, in people from the Revival Society's point of view. And after the Ming Dynasty falls, Mao Xiang considers himself and act like a Yiming, which is a remnant subject. This is a very interesting concept. So basically, when people call themselves or consider themselves, identify themselves as Yimin, they didn't submit to the new dynasty, but still consider themselves as the people belonging to the previous dynasty. The dynasty currently doesn't exist. So when Ming dynasty falls, and the Qing dynasty kind of took place of the Ming dynasty, Mao Xiang still think himself as part of the Ming dynasty and pay loyalty to the Ming dynasty. So this kind of upright persistence in politics kind of hugely shaped how what kind of person Mao Xiang is and how Mao Xiang react to a lot of different political events. And we can see some of these kind of representation in this text as well. And after the Ming dynasty falls, because Mao Xiang considered himself as a Yimin, a remnant subject, so he doesn't want to get involved in the new dynasty's political movement. So he kind of retreat to his hometown, built this painting water garden, and reside there till his death. He also write the whole thing, the reminiscence on Plum Shadow, in his garden. And now let's turn to the female protagonist Dong Bai, or Dong Xiaowan, who lived from 1623 to 1651. And Dong Bai is from Suzhou, so one of the most flourished region, most flourished city or even metropolitan at that time. And sometimes he was called Xiaowan, and she was called Xiaowan, and she also has a courtesy name which is Qinglian. He was named after, he made his own courtesy name, Qinglian, because he loved this very famous Tang Dynasty poet named Li Bai. So from this action, you can see Dong Bai, even if she is a courtesan, but she knows a lot about literature and has a very specific high-class taste in poetry and also in literature. And that is one of the thing make Dong Bai so famous and so attractive to literati at that time. She is considered the one of the 8 bellies of Qinghai, so including her and a lot of other famous courtesans. So these are courtesans. So they hang out with men. They get financial resources on men. They live relying on men, but they are also very cultured in literature, in calligraphy, or in painting. So very cultured, and also has a high taste in a lot of aesthetic events. And because people love Dong Bai so much, maybe because of I think a lot of the favor for this specific concubine, specific courtesan is due to this text we're going to read, due to Mao Xiang's recreation of the image of Dong Bai. So readers, contemporary readers, or readers from later dynasties love Dong Bai so much, so they cannot believe this perfect woman is going to die, or this perfect woman doesn't have a happy ending of his life. So there's a lot of guessing of what actually happened to Dong Bai after the whole warfare. So someone even said, she doesn't die. She became the Qing dynasty emperor, Shunzhi emperor's concubine, and entered the court. That's why you didn't see Dong Bai active in the society. So that's also one of the very interesting anecdote of the Qing court. So from this interesting made-up ending, you can see how popular this character, the Dong Bai as a character, is in contemporary readers' mind. And we need to take a little bit look at the Yiyuti as a genre, because as I said, this text is very different from any text we have read, and it is not a fiction. Suppose it's not a fiction, but a memoir. So, and actually this genre itself got its name from this specific text, because the text is called Reminiscence of the Plum Shadow Convent, So in Chinese, 隐梅安异语. So the last two characters, 异语, now became the name of the genre. We call text like this belongs to the genre 异语体. And it kind of has some tradition. So first is elegiac poetry tradition. So in Chinese literature, we have this tradition when someone's wife or concubine dies, the male master will write a elegiac poetry in memoir or pay respect to the deceased wife or concubine. And also we have the tradition of, Chinese has this tradition of writing biography of people to record what they did in their whole life. And that's more like a history, a personal history of one individual. But 异语体 is very different from these two traditions in the way of it kind of only records things between couples, pay a lot of extra attention to what is happening between the couples. So in the traditional Chinese view, the idea of couple is kind of not so much related to love or romantic relationship, but more related to the family responsibility or the how to sustain the family line, the lineage, that kind of moral kind of tradition. But 异语体 is very different. In 异语体, the writers write freely about the very private things happening between couples, which is very kind of a deviate from the tradition. And also 异语体 is written in a narrative form. It's like telling you a story, not always in a linear kind of a timeline, but in a story form. You can see what is happening, and you get a setting, you get characters, and you see how they are working there. And also 异语体 is a personal memories, record personal memories, and very much pay attention to the daily life. So not the grand narratives, not what is happening due to the war, people are dying or things like that, but very basic, very private on the level of individual. And also, if you still remember, I think I mentioned this in my introduction to the oil peddler story as well. So the idea of emotion or qing is very, very emphasized at that time. And also you can see a lot of representation of qing in this specific genre of 异语体 and in this text as well. So because Mao Xiang's this work, The Plum Shadow, gets so popular, kind of established this genre of 异语体. So people after Mao Xiang is intended to imitate Mao Xiang's way of writing. So they create a lot of follow-ups. So for example, like Chen Peizhi's Reminiscence of the House of the Fragrant Orchard. The title is very similar. And also Shen Fu's 6 Records of a Life Drifted. We are going to read part of this work 2 weeks after. So we are going to continue this line of reading 异语体. And also like Jiang Tan's Fragments of Memories Under the Autumn Lamp. And even till the 19th century, people like Wang Tao are still writing Memoir of the Meizhu Convent. So very similar title, very similar content, and very similar emotion is repeatedly expressed through this kind of specific genre of 异语体. In order to get a deep understanding of what is happening in the text, I think we need to pay attention to the courtesan culture at that time. So first we need to know the courtesan, or in Chinese 娼妓, is actually 2 words. So the 娼and the 妓. And I put the character here. So basically there is an evolution of the meaning of this specific word. So originally, 娼妓 refers to someone is good at playing music and good at playing music to entertain other people, and especially for female. So female playing music or even dancing to entertain male, and later the meaning of the 2 words 娼妓 changed and became courtesan or high-class prostitution. So women who entertain men, basically. And so if you consider the original meaning and the later evolution of the meaning of the term, actually they simultaneously exist, which means by calling someone a courtesan, you implied they provide both aesthetic and sensual pleasure. So they are very good at, as I said, they are very high cultured. They know a lot about literature, music, painting, calligraphy, and also they can serve you in a sexual way. So these two things simultaneously exist when you call a person 娼妓 or call a person courtesan. But because it's kind of understandable, because they are they are entertaining men and very much rely on the men for living, so they are classified as debased. But very differently, at that time the social hierarchy a little bit fluid, so they consorted with elite men and sometimes as intellectual equals. So it's a very interesting phenomenon if you think about that. Men will have their own wives, but their wives are not necessarily the person who are very much interested in doing literature or writing poetry. So the literatis, their own interest may not be able to share with their wives, but they can always share their interest in literature and culture with courtesan. That's why almost every literatus at that time will have some encounter with courtesan, because they not only are being served, but they are also finding intellectual equals to talk to have a peer kind of to share the interest with, that kind of idea. And also, if you still remember the description of Sister May in the oil peddler story, you can also see Sister May also have a lot of encounters with high-class officials, and what they do is to writing poetry, is to take a boat to sailing on the lake, to enjoy the natural scenery, and then making poetry and then drinking. So all those kind of culture event is happening between the courtesan and the literati. And just as what Sister May does in the oil peddler story, they can always reclaim respectability through marriage. So after Sister May married Qin Zhong, she became a legal wife and no longer a debased courtesan. And that is what is happening here. So when Dong Xiaowan, or our female protagonist, married Mao Xiang, she became a legal concubine, not the wife, but the concubine, but kind of elevate her social status. So the relationship between the courtesan and the officials are pretty much complicated. It is both legitimized and criminalized. So because on the one hand, everybody is doing that. Every literati has a courtesan counterpart. So that is kind of acceptable in the literati community. And also because there is actually some intellectual exchange happening between the courtesan and the literati. So that relationship is high class and cultured to some degree. So that is legitimized. But on the other hand, they are still courtesans. They still serve people. They still serve men with their body. So they are still belonging to the debased category, debased, very low hierarchy in the whole society. So the gentry family sometimes won't allow their descendants to take in courtesans that easily. So Mao Xiang also had that concerns. That's why at the beginning, a little bit spoiler, at the very beginning, his relationship with Dong Xiaowan didn't go through that easily. And when reading this specific story, I want you to consider some questions. So, for example, Mao Xiang mentioned at the very beginning what is called an embellishment in a relationship. So I want you to think about the question about embellishment, especially when you recall a memory about a love relationships. To which degree are those memories embellished? And to which degree is he being honest? So the idea of embellishment is very interesting, especially when the writer is talking about his own experience in love. And also this kind of internal question of, do they have an equal love or unequal love relationship? And we have encountered a lot of different relationships throughout the semester. And especially for this specific text, when it is written by a male literati, how would you think? Are they in an equal kind of relationship or unequal? And also, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this unit, we are going to see, we have already seen two stories by Eileen Chen, so the writers on the on the left of this page. So she was written from a female perspective to see what is happening to a couple in the time of war. But now we are going to encounter a male perspective, a male literati written about his experience. So how the gender differs, how kind of differences, what kind of huge distinguished idea about love is brought by gender. So I think this is a very interesting question, and we definitely need to talk more in Thursday's class. Thank you so much for watching this lecture video, and don't forget to leave a comments down below. I really want to hear what you thought about Mao Xiang and about a male literati's memoir about a concubine. And we are going to have an interesting discussion on Thursday. So see you later. See you on Thursday. Bye.